Hi, this is Zach with Morning Wound, and today I'll be taking a look at the Oris ChronOris Date. So this is a watch that Oris brought out at Bezel World 2017. Well-received watch, part of their kind of, I'd say, series over the last few years of making more better priced, kind of simple watches with vintage styling that have just gotten very popular. You know, they did the Diver 65 series, which is huge for them. They did the Pro Pilot Big Crowns, which I guess is not a vintage style, but is a very popular watch at a very good price point. And this I can kind of think of as part of that series of sort of casual watches with a lot of style to them, but still exuding kind of a really high level of fit and finish that you get from a brand like Oris, which is a brand that we talk about a lot on the website. They're one of the few kind of like independent, bigger Swiss brands, and they have a really unique aesthetic. You won't see one of their watches really feeling or looking like a watch from another brand. They march to the beat of their own drum, which is something we really appreciate here at Worn and Wound. So this watch, the ChronOris, is actually a bit of a kind of a curious watch because it's part of a line of chronographs and it's under their automotive line, but this is not a chronograph. That said, it speaks to a chronograph design from the 1970s. Actually, I believe their first chronograph, or at least automatic chronograph, which would have been a similar design like to this, but with a pusher at the top. So a mono pusher chronograph that wouldn't have had any sub-registers on it. So it was really just a 60-second counter, and then you had an internal bezel. It's a really cool design. You saw watches like that from other brands too, such as Omega. Definitely part of that kind of 60s, 70s automotive chronograph kind of craze, if you will. So they brought back this design, but they didn't do it as a chronograph. They did it just as a three-hand watch, but with an internal bezel. So you can still use it to, track elapsed time, if you will, just in the kind of classic way. So just to start, I mean, this watch is a really nice size, 39 millimeters wide. It's 43 millimeters lug to lug, which is quite short, which makes it sit really, really nicely on the wrist. I mean, this is just an incredibly comfortable, easy watch to wear, good daily wear kind of a watch. Has that nice, obvious sportiness to the case from the barrel design, but there's a nice amount of, kind of not formal details, but attractive details in the finishing. You have really nice radial brushing here, brushing coming up in the center. You have a big, bold, polished bevel around the edge. That just adds some, elevated style to it. So I think this is it's a really good like casual watch to just general sport watch design. Then you have the dual crowns here, which is something that's becoming kind of popular again. We've seen several watches actually in the last month or so with dual crowns, something that we've always been a fan of here. And so that controls the internal bezel. So you have the time crown, and then you have the internal bezel crown down here at 4. You can quickly tell the difference because the internal bezel crown has some striations in the texturing here, which is just a nice little visual cue. It is screw down, so you have to unscrew it. A little awkward when it's on your wrist, as you can see, but not terrible. It pops out, and then the mechanism here is really nice. So it is a clicking. It's probably a 120 click, but bi-directional bezel. So it lands really nicely on the mark. You don't have to futz around with kind of like, sometimes these have no clicking in them. And then you can end up kind of between the mark. But here it makes it really easy just to land where you want. And it just has a really satisfying feel to it. Obviously, you can then just push it in and, set your bezel as you wish. Just works very well. Looking at the dial now, I really like the aesthetic of this dial. It hits the right notes, and it doesn't really feel like anything else that's out on the market right now, which, is always just a good thing in finding a new watch. So you have this palette of kind of a middle neutral gray with black, and then highlights of orange, and then obviously some white for lume plots. You have a primary index here of large rectangles featuring lume on the inner side and then bright orange on the outside. So you have a nice mix of kind of like high day visibility with night visibility, which is just very functional and smart design, frankly. Around that then, in this kind of neutral gray area here, the ring on the outside, you have an index that, to me, it speaks to kind of the racing indexes you might find on a Speedmaster racing dial, something like that. That's not something that was signature to anyone that I really know of. I've seen it on Seiko, I've seen it on now Oris, I've seen it on many, many brands. And it's just kind of a mix of marks that go in and out. So you just have this kind of energetic feel that just speaks once again to the sportiness of the watch. Center area then, clean and gray, Oris at the top, ChronOris, 25 jewels. And then the black ring in the middle that just sets everything off, adds a really nice bit of contrast. It's funny, the kind of bullseye nature of this, I feel like sometimes when I've seen dials like this, they've been way too loud or way too aggressive. You just don't get that feeling from this. It feels very well executed. So it's subdued, it's tame, but it's still exciting. You have the date coming in there. It's a white date disc with a black numeral on there. It works fine here. I think it would have been interesting to see actually a black date disc with a white numeral, but then that could have felt actually like a little bit of a hole because that is taking a place of a marker. As is, it doesn't offend me. The location of the window itself works well with the dial. The internal bezel then is a silver metallic, black numerals on it, black marks on it, and an orange point for the origin. The hands, block hands, very simple, very classic, very 70s, and a bright orange second hand. It just looks great. I think that's one of those things, the way everything is very kind of monochromatic, but then you have the shock of orange, but it's not a obnoxious orange. It's all very, it's not fluorescent, it's kind of a burnt orange, which I think is much more appealing to the eye. And it makes it less of a kind of a look at me detail and more of just a subtle way to make something more legible and kind of stand out. So the Oris ChronOris comes on a couple different options for straps and bracelets. We have the steel bracelet here, which would be the most expensive option. It's a beautifully crafted bracelet, actually. So you can see here it's quite ornate, has brushed steel links on the side, and then this very complex interlocking system in the middle that's polished. Definitely, once again, speaks to that time period. We've seen some great bracelets from Oris, specifically on the Diver 65. That rivet bracelet is one of the coolest bracelets I think we've come across in some time. This one, I like the way it looks, certainly. I love the way it feels. It's very, it just wraps around your wrist very smoothly. It's a very kind of just pleasant feel. It's not too heavy or too thick. I think it fits very well. My one qualm with it is really how it connects to the case here. Rather than filling in this space and going for an end link, which granted could have given the watch maybe too much of an oval shape. That's a kind of a risk with barrels. They went for this drop lug that just kind of sits funny in there. Like it feels like, it's just not really sure. It feels almost like this is a bracelet from another watch, just a little bit. Just enough that it kind of distracts from it. But, if you're a bracelet person and that is the option you always go for, I think you'll be certainly satisfied with the fit and finish of the bracelet here. One slightly annoying thing, it is a 19 millimeter lug. Speaks to the vintage styling of the watch, but, that obviously makes secondhand straps a little bit less convenient to pick up. You can usually fit a 20 into a 19 millimeter, no problem, but there's just less exactly 19 millimeter straps out there. What's left? So this watch is powered by a Sellita SW200 movement. It's a 2824 equivalent. Very, it's a good movement. We've seen it many, many times. Watches less than this, watches a lot more than this. You don't have to worry about that movement at all. And for the price point, the MSRP with the bracelet is $19.50. So it's not a cheap watch by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not obnoxiously priced. This is a truly Swiss-made watch from a very good Swiss brand. So you're paying, I think, what you would expect for that. It is less with other options. I believe it's $17.50 with their nylon strap or with their leather options. So you can get a little bit of a price break there. Either way, I think this is a really great watch, a very fun, casual watch, something for somebody who's looking for something sporty, but business, office appropriate, that it just has kind of a unique style to it.